Sabres Live is presented by Seneca Resorts and Casinos. Nothing else comes close.
We are going to overtime.
Marty, the podcast is back. It's Sabres Live Overtime, and we are inching closer to the trade deadline. So even with our Monday to Friday schedule, we need more time to discuss everything that's going on in and around the game. An old colleague of yours is going to join us here coming up.
Yeah, Kevin Kurz, and Kevin covers the New York Islanders with The Athletic. He did cover the San Jose Sharks with The Athletic, but I worked with him, as you say, an old colleague, is he was with the media relations of the Philadelphia Flyers when I was there for 2 seasons. So he was kind of like the Jordan LeBarber of the Flyers, where if he and I ever walked on the beach at the All-Star game, he would have been asking me all these questions. He took me and my son Jacob to a Phillies game it was Flyers did the Phillies, and he's the one that did like the behind the scenes and kind of basically asked the questions. So Kevin and I go way back. We always keep in touch. He hits me up with all these goalie questions all the time. And so now I figured, hey, why not get him on? Because there's a playoff race with the Islanders and the Sabres and other teams, and he's fantastic.
Sounds good to me. And when you're serious about the game, bet on Buffalo at the only sports books in Western New York. Seneca Resorts and Casinos betting counters are open daily, and self-service betting kiosks are available 24/7 at all 3 locations, whether you visit Seneca, Niagara, Allegheny, or Buffalo Creek. The Sports Lounge features the latest lines and multiple screens, so you never miss a play. The sports book at Seneca Resorts and Casinos, where the love of the game meets the thrill of the win. Kevin, it seems like the early returns, Bo Horvat with the Islanders, have been a very good thing for he and the team. How would you describe his first few days here with the squad?
Yeah, I would say so. They've won both of the games that he's been in the lineup. They kicked it off on Monday in Philadelphia with a 2-1 win, and he didn't score that game, but you could tell that there was some chemistry there on his line with Matthew Barzal and Josh Bailey, particularly Barzal. It's been a real struggle, I think, for the Islanders to find someone to play with him. So they move him to the wing. They put Horvat in the middle, and then they do hook up for a goal last night in the win over Seattle. A really pretty goal where Barzal sort of stripped the puck from Yanni Gourde along the wall. And you could tell the whole time, it was almost in slow motion for me. You could tell that Matt wanted to push it over to Horvat to his right to get him a goal in front of the home crowd, and he was able to do that. So, goal scoring has been a struggle for this team, but they got 4 last night. That was the first time in 9 games they've gotten more than 2. So I think that's still going to be an ongoing facet of their game to monitor. Can they score enough goals to win? But certainly Bo Horvat is a guy that can do that and is going to help.
So that's an easy narrative, right? Like the Islanders don't score a lot of goals. And that's what people around the NHL on the cover would say, the Islanders, they don't score a lot of goals. But you're there, you see them every day, you see them practice, you see them in games. Was it a lack of talent offensively? And does that one addition in Bo Horvat make them now a team that, they're not going to be top scoring NHL team, but it makes them at least middle of the pack with the addition of Horvat?
Well, yes and no. I think we're going to have to see some more sustained power play success, because that's been the biggest reason why this team is where they are, which is still out of a playoff spot, is the power play has been terrible. So they got a goal on Monday in Philly. It was not from that Horvat unit. It was Kyle Palmieri, who's also been very good since he came back in the lineup. That's maybe a sneaky guy that was out that maybe we didn't appreciate how much they missed him, but the power play is going to have to get going. And so they put Horvat in the middle of that top unit. He's one of the best face-off guys in the league, and particularly on the power play. So that should help. But, scoring aside, there were just far too many games where, I know it sounds a little cliche to say they didn't play 60 minutes, but it was really an issue for this team. And early in the season, through the first, 3 months, it was pretty consistently their starts were not very good. And then leading in the All-Star break, it was their third periods. They went 11 straight games without a third period goal, which to me is hard to fathom in today's NHL. How is that even possible? So, the last 2 games, I think the most encouraging part of these last 2 games with Horvat in the lineup, if you're an Islanders fan, is that the compete level and just the efforts that they were putting forth throughout the duration of these games they were both really good. I mean, it was probably their two best 60-minute efforts since before Christmas, or maybe just after Christmas time. They beat the Penguins 5-1 before they really started to nosedive. So I think,
remember, you're talking to a Sabres fan base here, Kevin, that doesn't want the Islanders to do well, right? So I know that they've won 4 in a row and they got Horvat, but this and other people around the league are listening too, but they're thinking, well, we're screwed now because I don't know about that all the time, and they're doing good.
Listen, I'm not going to certainly proclaim here that all of the Islanders' problems are solved with the acquisition of Bo Horvat. There were too many things that were not very well for this team before he got here. And let's face it, they played a Flyers team that I know they had been playing better, and they only beat them 2-1. And then they beat Seattle last night. Well, Seattle, that was their first game since the All-Star break. They flew across the country the day before, and Martin Jones wasn't very good in goal. So listen, they have to put points in the bank now, I think, if they're going to make a run, because they have games that are winnable coming up. It's Vancouver, it's at Montreal, and then against Ottawa. So those are 3 winnable games before the schedule starts to get a little bit more difficult. But, I'm not going to say that I think all of a sudden they're a playoff team. I think we need to see a little bit more from this team on a more consistent basis. But as you said, to kick off this segment, I mean, they have been better, and there are some early encouraging signs with Horvat in the mix now.
Do you think there is any situation where they would consider trading Semyon Varlamov if it helped address another need for them?
I don't think so. And that's the reason for that is twofold. The biggest strength of this team right now is the goaltending tandem, and Varlamov has been very good. He was the one, he actually started back-to-back games. He played the final game of the All-Star break against Vegas. He was outstanding. He played the first game coming out of the break because Sorokin was in Florida. He was outstanding in that win against the Flyers. And I think we all know now how important it is to have 2 very good starting goalies. And there's no one in the system right now that would conceivably be able to come up and give them anything remotely close to the backup goaltending that Varlamov can give them. It's, Corey Schneider has done some nice things in the AHL, but he's not a guy I think you want to rely on. So, and particularly every game is so important down the stretch for these guys. This isn't the sort of thing where they can just take a scheduled loss. They've got to fight for points every single game, and there are obviously some back-to-backs remaining. So, I know you want to talk a little bit more about whether this team might make future trades, but I don't think Varlamov is a guy they want to deal. I think they could get some more depth pieces without having to trade Varlamov, who, by the way, has a 16-team no trade clause. So even if they did want to move him, it wouldn't be as simple as just calling, the 31 teams around the league.
So what other moves could Lou look into, or is he done? Like, did he make his big move before the All-Star break, get an early return, and then just say, this is what we got, you go make the playoffs and be, early in the clubhouse and having his cocktail?
I don't think they're done. I don't think they should be done. This is still, that Horvat deal to me signaled that this is still a general manager who wants to make the playoffs and thinks that they could do some damage if they get in. And he even said it himself that once you get in, anything can happen. And I know it's sort of a cliche line, but he experienced that as part of, when the Devils made their run in I guess it was 2014, right? They were the 6th seed. Yeah. They lost to the 8th seed at LA Kings. So he has obviously some personal experience in that. And there are obviously other countless examples of teams that were low seeds that went on runs. But to me, this team still needs a couple more things. They need another forward. Oliver Wahlstrom, it looks like he's out for the season. Cal Clutterbuck, we're not sure what's going on with him. They've been pretty tight-lipped about the injury updates, but Wahlstrom, at least I think we know at this point he's not going to play for the rest of this season. We saw him on crutches and a big knee brace in the press box yesterday. So I think you're looking at maybe adding another depth forward. Josh Bailey has been inconsistent this season. We'll see if he can stick on that Horvat line, but he's a guy that they might want to think about upgrading. Simon Holmstrom is a rookie who's been on the 3rd line. Both of those guys are right wings. So maybe you look to upgrade that position. But I think more importantly is they're going to need another puck-moving defenseman. And that's a facet of their game that Lane Lambert has been pretty consistently harping on. They don't get the puck out of their own zone quickly enough. And that's been a little bit better lately, but I still think they could use another guy back there that's an established puck-moving defenseman that can help transition it out of their own end a little bit more quickly than they've been able to do this season.
So if you were handicapping the East race for the 2 wildcard spots, let's just narrow it down to 5 teams, the 2 that hold the spots, Washington and Pittsburgh, along with the Islanders, Buffalo, and Florida. How would you view this likely playing out?
Oh, geez. That's a good question. I mean, Washington might you want to say Washington is vulnerable, but they've gotten healthier. I mean, Pittsburgh, it seems like they have some real problems, and I know they beat Colorado last night, but I didn't get the impression that was that was a great game from them either. So, boy, I don't know. I mean, Buffalo's that up and coming team, right? Do they have the experience to do it? And conversely, the Islanders, they do have a lot of experience, but as I said before, I think they still have some issues. I don't know, man. That's really tough. At least it's more interesting this season than it was last season. You know, I got here and started coming to the Islanders last December, and they were basically out of it by then. And even when they were in 9th place, they were like 15 points back of 8th place. So
yeah,
I'll just be content that it's going to be an interesting race coming down the wire, and we should have some pretty good 4-point games on the horizon, because I think, you know, these teams all, I don't think the Islanders play Florida anymore, but they play those other teams at least once, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an easy way to possibly handicap it. And obviously with my background, I would look at the goaltenders first, right? Like Darcy Kemper and Ilya Sorokin lead the league in shutouts. Now, Kemper won the cup last year. Sorokin is a Vezina, you know, probably favorite or close to favorite with Allmark. That's 2 goaltenders that you can't dismiss. Tristan Jarry is out now with an upper body injury. The Sabres, Luukkonen, is that going to do it with Comrie and Craig Anderson? I mean, they could. They've had success with them. And the Florida Panthers with Bobrovsky and Knight, I mean, it's been a disaster. So if you handicap it with goaltenders, I would say, okay, Washington and the Islanders have the better chance, but you can't just look at one position.
Yeah, and you know, that's one question I've gotten frequently over the last few weeks and months: is Ilya Sorokin the real deal? And boy, this guy, I mean, he just makes difficult saves look easy. It's almost like he's so calm back there. And I was particularly impressed with him when the Islanders were having trouble scoring more than 2 goals for, 2 months or whatever it was. He was still unflappable. He was able to compartmentalize, and he wasn't getting, you could tell he just was not getting frustrated from the fact that he was doing his job in net, but the wins weren't coming. There was one stretch where I think he had a .930 save percentage, and he was like 5-4-2 over that run. So I'm impressed the more I watch this guy. I know his teammates love him, and he does not seem to get fazed by anything that's going on around him. And again, that's why I think that the tandem, I do think he leans a lot on Varlamov as the Russian counterpart there. They have that commonality, and they have a great relationship. I do think that's helped Sorokin acclimate to the NHL and helped to make him the goalie he is now. But that's the strength of this Islanders team is the goaltending tandem. So I don't think you'd mess with that. I think you keep Varlamov, and obviously Sorokin's going to be the guy that they give the bulk of the starts to, but they've both been very good lately.
Kevin, you've been on the beat and involved in the game for now decades. And previously to this stop for you, it was in San Jose, where perhaps the most talked about tradable asset is still located, and that is Timo Meier. When you think of Timo Meier, and just this week, he's become one of 11 players already this season to reach the 30-goal plateau. Do you think Timo Meier warrants all the attention he is getting right now prior to the trade deadline?
I do. I mean, Timo's career was a little bit odd. It was, he came up and he made an impression right away, and then he sort of took a couple steps backwards when I think that was partly because the Sharks team culture was kind of screwed up there for a while when Joe Pavelski left. And I think that affected Timo. And, you know, you can't, all the COVID stuff that was going on too, right? How does that affect different people? But since he really seemed to refocus at the beginning of last season, I do think all the tools are there. You know, he's got the speed, he can hit, he gets to the front of the net, he can shoot the puck. I do think he's a guy that does warrant that sort of attention. I would worry a little bit, maybe giving him a real long-term contract extension, because after he got his most recent extension was also seemed when he took a little bit of a step backwards, but you know, I was in his mid-20s, and I think he's matured over the years. I think he's become a guy that you can rely on, and I do, you know, if I'm a team like Buffalo or New Jersey looking for another piece or looking for more scoring on the wings, I do think he would be worth a pretty hefty price to pay, frankly.
What's he like as a person? Because the one thing that we talk about in Buffalo now is, number one, Kevin Adams wants players that want to be here in Buffalo. Number two is that group who seems to really, really mesh well together and connect with the community and you know, Western New York, Southern Ontario, and all of that. What's Timo Meier like? Is he an outgoing type of person, quiet, easy to talk to? What's he like as a person?
Yeah, he's not the most outgoing guy, but he is a guy that I think a lot of, especially the other players that are his peers, they do get along with him. He's a guy that I do think, again, I think he had some growing up to do a little bit, particularly in his early 20s. And it just seems like he's worked through that. And I know he speaks like 7 different languages. So he's no dummy either. So I do think he's a guy that could walk into a dressing room and, you know, mesh with the teammates right away. Especially,
do you know the 7 languages?
I don't know.
I want to know. Like,
I hope that's true.
Swede, because in Buffalo that's important.
Yeah, I hope I'm not getting mixed up with somebody else, but I'm pretty sure that's the case.
No, I think you're right. I think I saw that somewhere, because I played with Chris Kreider, who does speak like 5 languages, and there's a few players around the league that do, and I think Timo Meier is one of them. You're right.
Yeah, you know, I think it would be important. Like I said, you know, when the Sharks dressing room culture sort of started to fracture there after Pavelski left, I think he was maybe caught in the middle of that a little bit. But again, you know, everybody goes through that sort of stuff, right? Or so many people go through that stuff in their early 20s. You just hope they grow out of it. And I think Timo has, just simply based on how effective he's been on this Sharks team that you know, for a second straight year isn't really going anywhere.
Well, I'm in my 50s and I'm still trying to figure it out. So
me too.
I'm not going to be critical of Timo, that's for sure. But I would say this, Kevin, again, because you were in the West for so long and watching so closely these teams, their ups and downs, and now a team like LA that it is so close, but maybe they haven't had that, you know, last line of goaltending, or Anaheim, which is still in kind of the rebuild era. How are you looking at the teams out West as far as who's going to make a big impact here at the trade deadline? Who's going to go for it? Does Jakob Chychrun move further west? Does he end up in the East? You know, what are your thoughts here as we get close to the deadline?
It's interesting, you know, all the speculation that Jeff Chychrun could end up in LA, because that seems like the perfect kind of guy they would need right now. The Kings are kind of the most intriguing team to me, but like you said, Marty, there's maybe some questions about their goaltending, right? You look at the Pacific Division, it feels like all of those teams sort of have some issues right now, right? With Edmonton, is their depth going to hold up? The Golden Knights are without Mark Stone now. The Flames have been sort of up and down, and I'm still not sold on the Kraken. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that, and maybe it's just because I covered Martin Jones for too long, and he's getting the bulk of their starts. But
and he played badly against the Islanders. Maybe
yeah,
your reason, because he's been good this year.
Yeah, I know, right? So the Pacific's really intriguing to me. Which teams are gonna make moves there to try to separate themselves from the pack? So yeah, it's, you know, I'll tell you what, it's easy. It's a lot easier to follow the whole league when you live on the West Coast, because, like, you know, I would go to a Sharks game that would start at 7:30 Pacific time, but like I'd be sitting on my ass at home before going to the rink, at least watching like the first 2 periods of an East Coast game, right? Now it's like I'm working late, so the late games are over by the time I get done working and drive home. So I haven't watched enough of those games, as many of those games as I would have liked. It's tougher out here.
It's tougher, yes, unless you're like Duffer and you just stay up all night and never sleep. So that's what he does. He sends email at 2:33 in the morning. Hey guys, possible talking point for tomorrow. I'm like, dude, go to bed.
That's
But okay, very impressive. How about this one? So Rasmus Dahlin's having a fantastic year in Buffalo, and for some, he could be a Norris finalist. You covered Erik Karlsson, and you see what Karlsson is doing this year. Could get over 100 points this year. On Sabres Live, I said, I don't think he'll get to 100 points, but he could get to 102. So I kind of went on both sides of the fence here. So how's Karlsson's season? And is there a way for Dahlin to say, I'm going to snag the Norris if the Sabres make the playoffs and San Jose doesn't?
It's interesting because I am one of the voters for those awards, and I feel like I've always put team performance at near the top of the list when I'm considering that, because I do think it's important. I like Ilya Sorokin is the guy they talk about out here. Is he a Vezina Trophy finalist? I'm like, well, if the Islanders get in the playoffs, then absolutely. If he doesn't, I don't know, maybe not. But boy, 100 points from Karlsson. I mean, that'd be the first time since Brian Leetch, right? Like 92. I mean, I don't know how you don't give it to the guy if he's that much far ahead of the other players in terms of points. And I know it's a defenseman position, and Adam Fox is another guy that maybe is a little bit more well-rounded and his defensive numbers are better than Karlsson's, and Karlsson's playing meaningless games. Maybe he's taking more chances because, who cares if you give up 3 goals when you're playing for a team that's in the mix for Connor Bedard. So I understand that argument, but if he's that far out, I mean, and plus, it's like every time you look at Twitter, there's some sort of ridiculous highlight he's making that somebody had clipped. So it's and I think you have to give the guy a lot of credit too, because he really did go through some tough seasons there. And I'll admit, I thought he was done, and not done in terms of he was going to have to retire, but I thought the injuries had taken enough of a toll that he was never going to be able to do some of the things that he's doing now. So full credit to him for being able to do that sort of stuff. If you're Doug Wilson, you're probably looking at this thinking, where the hell was this 3 years ago? Or else I still might have a job or maybe even a Stanley Cup ring by now. But I think if he reaches 100 points, I mean, man, I don't know how you don't give it to him if that happens.
Kevin, my last one for you would be, what's the biggest non-story for you here as we approach the trade deadline? Meaning names that you always hear that you're just like, these are not going to have the impact that people think they're going to have around the league.
Oh man, in terms of guys that are
yeah, what the cycle is like, right? Like we hear the same names last year, like honestly, Ben Sherratt, like, yeah, like, okay, well, that was quick. Florida's out, and it just, I don't know. I feel like we're all guilty of it because we feed the beast on a daily basis here by pushing names. But I do wonder if you sit there just, as an observer, analyst, and writer within the game, whether you see like, I don't know how much impact these guys are going to have.
Yeah, I mean, because the 2 names at the top of the list, I do like them both, and maybe that's just because I've seen them so much between Timo Meier and Jakob Chychrun. I thought, the year that the Sharks played them 8 times, I mean, he was the best defenseman on the ice whenever the Sharks would play the Coyotes. Like in 6 of those 8 games, he was just outstanding. So, and I think I might have had him on my Norris ballot in the top 5 that season. Patrick Kane, right? His numbers aren't that great. Is he dealing with some sort of injury? And I know he's a guy that the Islanders fans have been talking about frequently because he's said in the past how much he likes playing with Matt Barzal. And does he look at this Islanders lineup now and see Josh Bailey on the right side of Bo Horvat and Matt Barzal and think, boy, that might be a pretty good place for me. So, I question how much impact Kane would have when there seems like there's so much uncertainty there. Mm-hmm. But it does seem like some of especially the depth defenseman pieces get a little bit more too much press than they should. I can't think of any off the top of my head right now, but
Joel Edmondson.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good one. Right. And Shane
first rounder. a second rounder and a third rounder for Joel Edmondson. Let's make a deal.
Yeah.
Kevin,
But we need that stuff. That's what people read about. We got to hammer that stuff.
That's true.
Absolutely. We always do. The fans love it. They are the leader in that. They want more rumors, and that's what it was. When I was in Philly and you were, obviously, covering us and working with the team and all of that, was I part of a lot of rumors? Was I a name that you heard around the office and were like, we can't trade Marty? What are you guys talking about?
I do not remember that one way or the other. What that have been 2008 or so?
Yeah, 2007, 8, and 2008, 9.
I just remember that 2008 season was so fun because, the team was so bad in 06, 07, and then 2008 kind of came out of nowhere, right? And it was with you and Danny, and I saw Danny 2 nights ago in the press box, and I said, "You got any scoops for me?" He goes, "Yeah, I probably do, but I should probably just keep my mouth shut."
He's a typical front office guy now.
Yeah.
You're not getting anything. I can't get anything out of Briere. I'll text him, call him. All I get is if I put a joke out there, I get a quick response. That's it.
And Hartsy's doing TV now. I got to say hi to him on NHL Network. I just remember that season being such a good time because it was they really needed it, right? Coming out of that, all the Forsberg stuff, and they make all these moves and they bring in you and Danny and Hartsy and Chemo, and it was like an instant turnaround for that franchise.
Yeah, a lot of terrific names for sure. Kevin, thank you for your insight today, and obviously really shaping up to be an interesting next few weeks before the deadline and before season's end. Thanks so much for the time.
Yeah, you got it, guys. Thanks for having me.
Some good insight from Kevin. We appreciate that. Marty, I do have one lingering question here about Arizona and Jakob Chychrun. If you're the Coyotes, why would you trade him to Boston when Boston is clearly going for it and doesn't have a lot of presumably current assets on the team that they're going to want to part with? And tying it in with The Athletic here, where Kevin writes, like, the Bruins don't have a super deep system with which to part top prospects. Like, if you're Arizona, wouldn't you be looking at somebody that is absolutely flush with high-end prospects?
I would anticipate a smart team to do exactly that. Look at who has the deepest prospect pool and go and pick right at that. Like when the Sabres traded Ryan O'Reilly, the St. Louis Blues had a deep prospect pool with Jordan Kyrou, Robert Thomas, Tage Thompson. Now, they swung for the first two. I believe they did. They ended up with Thompson. But when you're deep, that you see what Tage turned out to be, right? Thomas and Kyrou are fantastic, but they had deep pockets when it came to prospect. You can hit it. Boston doesn't. But again, I'm thinking, okay, like Boston could trade you first round pick in 3, 4, 5 years down the road. But if you're Arizona at some point, how often can you kick or punt the ball down the road? Like, you got to make do now, especially if it's with Chychrun. I think that's why it's been held up, is that they want so much for Chychrun that they're not getting what they want. Don't trade him to Boston now and then get a 50 cents on the dollar return.
Yeah, I agree with you. Is there any, with our discussion with Kevin and what we've been doing on a daily basis, is there one team, I would say in the West, that we haven't talked about enough that you think might somehow make a way into all of these, whether it's Chychrun or somebody else, but can somehow make a big splash? Because Marty, we barely glossed it over on the show recently. Like, it is so tight in the West as it pertains to the Pacific Division, but the wild card and Minnesota and all their cap nightmares ahead. Like, the Wild are flush with prospects, but it's not going to help them right now. But like, are they kind of frozen by this? I don't want to steer you towards Minnesota, but is there a team in all of this that is really intriguing for you?
Okay, so I believe Minnesota is going to miss the playoffs. I think Colorado is going to catch them. I think Calgary is going to get hot. Minnesota, now third in the Central, is going to find themselves out of a playoff spot very shortly here. That's what I believe. So they would have to make a big trade and get themselves going and use some of their prospects and picks to be able to get there. Now, the linchpin in all of this out West, in my opinion, is the Chicago Blackhawks. Kane, we talked to Kevin about him, Taze, Max Domi, Andreas Athanasiou, Jake McCabe, Peter Mrazek, whatever, right? Like they've got so many pieces, and I don't want to say Chicago can maybe afford to sell low, but they really don't want anything happening for the rest of the year. They want picks and prospects, and they want Connor Bedard. So I think that's where it all starts from with Chicago.
True, but do any of those players, in your opinion, ultimately have a significant impact on their new teams?
You're going to laugh. I think I could see Athanasiou have an impact because I've always liked him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Put him in a third, fourth line and use his speed, and who knows, maybe he gives you depth, that type of impact. I still think Patrick Kane can have an impact, and I know the numbers are not that great this year, but it has to be a miserable year for Kane and Taste, to be honest with you, and have all this rumors and what is going to happen, and the team is terrible. A 3-month season for Patrick Kane on a good team with good players, I think that could be very, very tasty for him.
Well, thanks to Kevin Kurz and our entire crew, and thank you for being with us. The conversation continues Monday to Friday on Sabres Live. We'll see you soon.